And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Breslin Center. Michigan State blew out Nebraska. All right, they beat Minnesota by, 18? And they beat these guys by 30-some, back-to-back blowouts in Big Ten play. So a nice start for Michigan State here in early December. Michigan State wins the game 89-52. And also, before I get into it, man, the rafters packed all the way to the corners. People were in here. It was great to be at a noon sporting event. Paul didn't have one during all football season. Had one today, and I'm not saying it's my favorite, but it was different. And I sensed that Michigan State fans were like excited to get here, have a noon athletic event, packed in the corners. Now there are a few empty seats around here in the corporate level, but up in the corners, packed. Big Ten basketball, noon, Saturday, holidays, December. I'm not big on Big Ten playing in early December, but today was a keeper.
I'm big on Michigan State going 2-0 in early December because when they've had a lot of success. But I'll echo what you said. I was in the doctor's office like 2 weeks ago talking to my doctor who's a Michigan State fan, and he's like, man, looking at the schedule, there's just not enough noon games where I can take my family to, or early Saturday games or those type
basketball
of basketball. And I'm like, it did feel good. I mean, you and I are both night owls. Get that, and sometimes it's hard to get up like really early when you got to take your kid to play practice and get here. But it was cool to see. It was cool to see the environment that was here. It was cool to see the students active and loud, and it was fun to see something that wasn't like dictated by a TV schedule. Mm-hmm. So I think that was big. And then the product on the floor was amazing for Michigan State, and I think the excitement level, the energy level is high because of the way Michigan State played in Maui. You get the big win over North Carolina. You get a good win over Colorado. You come home and you win on the road to start Big Ten play decisively at Minnesota, a tough place to play. And then you come in here and you just dominate against a team that I think is pretty good. The only loss they had was a good St. Mary's team. They lost by 4 points. They had a double figures win at Creighton, which has kind of been a bugaboo for them. But the way Michigan State won this game, it's a feel-good win. We haven't really seen them win like this against a decent opponent. This is what Michigan State did to Baylor, last year at the Palace. And I think there's some similarities in that game, in that Michigan State was completely dialed in for that game. They felt like that was a must-win game, that they absolutely had to have it. But for Michigan State to come off of like some of the wins that they've had recently and come into this conference game at home, not rely on the crowd to get them through, but to have that kind of same must-win intensity on a short prep, it's really impressive because of seeing guys dive on the floor, seeing guys defend as well as they did again in some tough matchups against some good players, Bryce Williams and Gary and the Connor Siege, and those guys are all get to the free throw line. Michigan State defended without fouling, but to see the sense of urgency in an early season Big Ten game, because I think all these guys in the roster, at least the older ones, know that if you win your first two Big Ten games, you can kind of build on it. And Michigan State's now got this off period where it can kind of get back to what the traditional growth during the holiday break.
Yeah, we haven't done one of these since the Samford game. And I think one of the key games for Michigan State was the Memphis game. Lost the game, but you were presented with a long, athletic, mature team that put pressure on you in the half court. It's good for you to realize your weaknesses. People like Kohler and Fiddler kind of struggled with all that pressure in that game. All right, they've seen it. They lost a game. It helps you reset and get and motivation and want to get another one of those shots at a team like that and knocks you down a peg and you come back and you beat Carolina. But I think the game against Memphis was a good lesson for Michigan State at this point. We'll see if they play again later in the year. I think Memphis has a lot of ability. It was a good lesson late in November. Now this one, I think that Michigan State, the depth, it was interesting what Fred Hoiberg, Nebraska's coach, said about Michigan State. He said they just come at you at waves. And this is a Hoiberg coach who's been watching Michigan State closely for a number of years, not only as an opponent of Michigan State, but his son was a walk-on for Michigan State. So he knows Michigan State as well as any non-Michigan State person on the planet. And you can just tell he thinks his team's got a little something different. He talks about the way they come at you with waves, the fast break, and the physicality. You might not think that this collection of Michigan State players are the most physical group. There's no Antonio Smith, Andre Hudson type of brawler, but the way Michigan State can send multiple big men on you, and they all play hard because they want playing time. And when you get that many guys all playing hard, they wore Nebraska down. That's a cliche to say a team wore down, but you could see Nebraska in my opinion, like 5 minutes in the second half, just kind of like, I don't want to say giving up, but just kind of like accepting that they're just going to be a step slow everywhere as Michigan State would check in another 3 or 4 people, rebound, run. And then Nebraska started, taking fatigue shots, as Tom Crean would call it. And at one point, they were like 1 of 14 in the second half, ended up shooting 28% in the second half, 3 air balls in the second half. Michigan State getting in and going. And they talk about complementary football. That was complementary for basketball. Complementary basketball today for Michigan State. Depth, defense, rebound, run, all of it. Shot pretty well. Didn't shoot the lights out from 3, but didn't have to because they just ran them ragged everywhere else. Impressive strength in numbers for Michigan State to a T.
I thought Nebraska played pretty good defense in that opening half. They make it hard for you.
While, yeah.
They make it really hard for you to get into what you want to get into. And we saw a lot of times, I didn't feel like there was very many times, unless Michigan State got a good outlet pass and a deep rebound or a clean rebound, where they actually got the chance to set up earlier in their offensive set. So I think that kind of played into Nebraska's hands, where it was one of those games where they've been successful at it, like limiting your possessions, making it hard for you to get the ball in low. Last year when Michigan State played Nebraska, I think the bigs collectively, with the exception of Malik Hall, who kind of played more of a wing position, but they didn't get the ball inside. And I just felt like Nebraska did some good things. But in that first half, Michigan State made Nebraska work for everything that they got. And then Michigan State also had some key plays. Every time they got it to 6, they got a couple of free throws. Michigan State got it back up to 10. And I felt like Michigan State got some easier stuff than Nebraska, but they consistently made it difficult for Nebraska to get what they wanted. But Michigan State kind of wore them down in the second half. The dominance on the glass, it's demoralizing. When a guy like Jackson Kohler gets 7 offensive rebounds, and he had 7 offensive rebounds fairly early in this game, that's demoralizing, because as good as Nebraska, I think, played on defense, when you give up those offensive rebounds, and a couple of those led to threes, it can really wear you down. But this is about as complete a game as I can remember Michigan State playing. Nebraska's, maybe they bounce back from it. I bet they will. I do feel like I didn't know going into this game because Nebraska was so fresh.
Yeah.
If that would hurt Michigan State on quick turnaround, because Izzo was after practice the other night, he was talking about how much stuff that Nebraska runs. Mm-hmm. How they've got veteran players, and they do have veteran players. And
they didn't have a midweek game. They had 6 or 7 days to get ready.
And sometimes that hurts you. But on the flip side, when you have a deep team that has found different ways to win, and it plays, it isn't taking a team lightly. Sometimes having played that Big Ten game, the first Big Ten game, and is of benefit, because there's something about conference play.
Yeah.
The sense of urgency always bumps up in conference play, and you don't realize that. You might think, well, we beat Creighton on their home floor. We played a 4-point game with St. Mary's, and those are really good teams. And yeah, they might be like Baylor or Michigan State. Michigan State beat a really good Baylor team last year. It's not the same as conference play in terms of the little things, the details in the scouting reports. Like, what these guys do. You know where they like to go.
The intangibles kind of evened out. They had more time to prepare. Michigan State had a shorter turnaround, but they had a Big Ten game under their belt.
But Michigan State had that sense of urgency. And I've rarely seen Michigan State with a sense of urgency being like the hunter.
Yeah.
In a game like this with good talent. This is a good, talented Michigan State team, not an elite Tom Izzo talented Michigan State team. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times after games like this, we're talking about, Michigan State's not used to playing with the name on their jersey in conference play. In this one, Michigan State was hungry and decisive, and they didn't let up. Guys were still on the floor in the second half.
Yeah, Jackson Kohler, excellent game. He only had 3 field goal attempts, and he did more to impact this game than anyone I've seen in a long time with only 3 field goal attempts. He'd get in the post, get double teamed, find people, 4 assists, several floor burns, getting on the deck. Izzo with a fist pump. Midway through the second half, excited for the energy that Kohler is giving. Now that he's starting and getting all those minutes, he's really gotten comfortable with where he is and what his role is and what he can provide. In previous 2 years, if he got in the game for like 4 minutes each half, if he got the ball in the post, I don't want to try to pretend to know what he was thinking, but it seemed like he's like, well, if I don't shoot now, I'll never get the ball again. I'm not going to get back in, so I'm going to try to do my post move I've been working on. Now he's just more within the flow of the game, and he's having an impact, and he's kind of firing people up. He's kind of a motivational guy that way. And, with the rebounding now, Michigan State out-rebounds them Nebraska 48-19. Nebraska wasn't even going to the offensive glass, kind of like the old Dick Bennett style, just trying to get back, and didn't do that real well either. But it's a Michigan State team that out-rebounded Minnesota in the first half, something like 24-8 on Wednesday, and didn't out-rebound Minnesota in the second half. But the first half against Minnesota and these two halves against Nebraska, I realize they're not playing against Phi Slamma Jamma, but for Michigan State, coming into the year, being a really good rebounding team, like a plus 10 rebounding margin team, is not something that I thought this team would be capable of. Is this kind of fool's gold rebounding these last two games?
No, I don't think so. I was wondering about that watching the Minnesota game, because like Minnesota has got that Frank Mitchell guy from Minnesota. He was like an all-world rebounder at Canisius, but he separated his shoulder in exhibition play. So I'm like, okay, he's not quite condition-wise where he was supposed to be. He's a long-arm, 6'8", 260-pound guy. Michigan State out-rebounding those guys, but Minnesota's got all these kind of, I'm not going to say rent-a-bigs, but that's what it feels like, and they're not like really together. But this Nebraska team, numbers-wise, in the non-conference at least, was like, pretty decent on the glass. And the thing that I noticed in this game is a lot of those early rebounds that you're talking about, like Kohler with some of his offensive rebounds, he got really early position, and they were, there's sometimes when Nebraska was trying to get that rebound or keep him off the glass on some of those, on some of those offensive boards. He was just there earlier and beat him to spots, and you've got more guys competing for rebounds. And I think one of the things that maybe makes this team a little bit better rebounding team than they were a year ago is because I didn't feel like Michigan State's bigs were very good at rebounding, period, last year. And I felt like a lot of the guards, the thing that we heard all the time from Tom Izzo is guards got to help out rebounding. Guards got to help out rebounding. And, now that maybe some bigger guards are out there, you get Jaden Akins where not every night is he going to give you 6. And I don't know what he did in this game, but there's nights where he's gone out and got 9. Trey Alleman's, he had some really nice defensive rebounds when they needed them. You got more guys helping out. I think Cohen Carr has really started to use his athleticism, and he's kind of improved as a rebounder. And even sometimes when some of the bigs, like a Carson Cooper, he had a good rebounding game today, but in some of the games he hasn't had a good rebounding game, or Shimon Zapala hasn't had a good rebounding game, they've erased guys. And so I think these guys are, maybe there's not elite rebounders, there's no Xavier Tillman, there's no Antonio Smith, but you got guys rebounding as a group, and most of these guys are pulling their weight. And when they don't pull their weight, or if someone gives up an offensive rebound or something like that, then they're usually hearing from it from Coach Izzo or from the teammates, and they're coming back and doing it the next time. I think even like a Xavier Booker, he didn't have a great game today, but he still finished with 6 rebounds, and there's times where he looks like a good two-handed rebounder when he gives the effort. But team rebounding, I think, is something that's pretty big, and I think Michigan State is kind of really starting to wear teams down. So I'm not ready to say this is an elite Michigan State team by any means. North Carolina wasn't the North Carolina of last year, the one that Michigan State lost to in the NCAA tournament. But to consistently out-rebound teams, to out-rebound Colorado, which is a big team, to consistently do it, I think, is impressive. And now that you're seeing the rebounding numbers, they're doing it when shots are falling. I think that's also impressive.
When you're coming off the bench with Cooper, he's going to play 15 minutes and give you a lot of effort, ball screen defense, help defense, scramble defense, botting people up, and comes away with 5 rebounds in 15 minutes. Xavier Booker had 6 rebounds. I know some of it's kind of garbage time or whatever, but that's good. That's something that they can build on. That's constructive. Now, I mentioned earlier that Michigan State didn't shoot the lights out from 3. Well, second half, Michigan State had some garbage time three-pointers. I think Michigan State shot 54% from three-point range in the second half. Ended up 39%, which is a really nice percentage. First half, they were like 4 of 12, 25%. Ended up with a real good percentage, so I just want to clarify that. I said they didn't shoot the lights out, but they ended up with a pretty good percentage.
Yeah, and I think the reason why it was so good in the second half, beyond being garbage time, is that team was completely unselfish. I haven't seen many teams, and we don't usually see in big-time play, we don't usually see Michigan State win by this much, because a lot of times, guys come in and, like Garrett Norman type of guy comes in, or a Kurt Tang, and they're like, they want to get some points and they're shooting, or Xavier Booker last year. In this one, the thing that surprised me is how many shots guys turned down that were, what I would call good shots. To get teammates the ball.
Extra pass.
Extra pass. But not only that, extra pass, but sometimes after that extra pass, then there's an extra pass at the elbow. Michigan State shot a high percentage from 3, but they also took some great jumpers. When that Nebraska team was softened up by the transition, by having to battle for everything on the glass. Michigan State just basically ran what you would see. It felt like a practice where they're running up and down the floor, against a scout team. And but they got the ball to really good spots, and I think that selflessness is infectious. Izzo said a bunch of times about Jackson Kohler, wanting to get that double-double, and you talked about him last year, and I agree with you. When he got that ball, he's going to go shoot it. In this game, against a double team, he waited for that. There's times where he passed out of a double team, but he waited for the double team. He could have tried to score. So I think that's significant. He's waiting for the double team, and one of the first big threes in this half, he waits for the double team, hits Jaden Akins in the corner, for the three. That's really good stuff. And one of the things that shocked me in this game is, for the second straight game, this is not fool's gold. I think Jackson Kohler has shown me that he can move his feet a whole heck of a lot better than I thought he could on defense. And I think he's proven something to himself. So it wasn't just Dawson Garcia, who's one of the most fantastic bigs or one of the more versatile dudes in the Big Ten, can hurt you in so many different ways. Today out there, Michigan State had the luxury of playing with their big lineup, with their rebound-dominant lineup quite a bit, because Jackson Kohler was doing a really good job against the drive. And there's lots of those sequences where Michigan State would get a Cohen Carr dunk. That one, the Jeremy Fears dunk, the one that he threw off his butt to Cohen Carr. Right after that, Jackson Kohler gets driven. He moves his feet very well, keeps his hands up, forces a really tough shot at the rim. It almost goes down, it pops out, but then Michigan State hits a three on the other end. Jackson Kohler's moving better on defense than I thought it was possible. And if this continues, that really opens up a lot of different things for Michigan State, and it allows them to be the physical team that Fred Hoiberg was talking about without giving up other things. And I think that maybe that's the difference between Michigan State this year and last year. I don't think Michigan State has to sacrifice as much when they go with a certain lineup that does this. Last year you go with a too big lineup and you're getting driven nonstop. And it's really costing you. Last year, you go with a certain lineup, and a guy like Cohen Carr, he's going to give you electrifying stuff, but he's not going to play great on-ball defense. Cohen Carr, there's been a couple times where he got beat today, and he adjusted, made an adjustment, and made a great defensive play. But there's a lot more times that I'm seeing where he's not getting beat off the dribble, where he's getting better and better on defense. And so a lot of these pieces, in my opinion, that had weaknesses, exploitable weaknesses that a lot of Big Ten teams would kind of go to work on, those weaknesses have been addressed to the extent which Michigan State can get more out of these different lineups without giving up too much. And I think that was apparent to me today. I don't know if it's going to continue, but I've watched a lot of Big Ten games in the last week, and one of the things I feel like in every single game I watch is each of these teams is really good in this one area, but they have an exploitable weakness. Like some of those Euro guys from Illinois. Northwestern was going to work on those guys with one-on-one matchups. I feel like Michigan State's had that in the past, where they had these drawbacks one-on-one, whether a guy couldn't play ball screen defense, or, Joey Hauser before his final year where he couldn't keep a guy in front of him. I feel like there's fewer of those exploitable weaknesses and more that Michigan State can exploit, and it's interesting.
Yeah, fewer flat tires out there, fewer holes in the dike, as Judd Heathcote used to say. And Kohler's moving his feet on defense has a lot to do with that. Ball screen defense, also communication, recovering in scramble situations, covering up for things as part of a five-man unit, creating an illusion of six men on defense, what Izzo's tried to get in a number of years. They're kind of getting that right now, and I like the way that Michigan State's 8-2. At this time last year, they lost 2 Big Ten games, lost to James Madison, and they were in a situation against Baylor where you had must-win games in December, which I thought was exhausting for the team, mentally exhausting. They ended up winning those games and beating Indiana State, before New Year's, and a lot of psychologically taxing games, which I think hurt them in February. It might even hurt them into March. I'll be intrigued to see how psychologically fresh and what kind of mental energy this team's going to have. Not only do they not have anyone play more than 24 minutes today, but there's not a mental grind either. Now, they put a lot into winning these 2 games. Izzo said, after they beat, getting the Big Ten season started right at Minnesota, tough place to play, took care of business there, and a short turnaround. Izzo, as he likes to say, the battle cry was getting to 2-0, because they remember what 0-2 was like, and they don't want to squander it and fall to 1-1. That all makes sense or whatever, but hunting it, like you said, and chasing it is different than doing it in like a must-win, frantic, guarding, defensive type of thing, like we're trying to guard what we have. And I like where this team is psychologically, too. There's some veterans on this team. I think the chemistry is better, and a lot of those bigs are a year older, and a lot of things are forming positively. Jeremy Fears, like Izzo said, he was one of the better passers that he'd recruited. Thought he was one of the better defensive players in the nation that year that he recruited. Lost a step because of the shooting situation last year. He says he's going to continue to get better. So there's still a higher ceiling for other guys. And Jace Richardson today with that three-pointer, a guy goes behind his screen and he just has the freedom and the IQ and the skill to say you can go by the screen off the dribble, boom, three-pointer, nails it. And three-point open shots all day today. You're talking about how Nebraska did a good job early in the game taking away some of Michigan State's actions on offense. But Michigan State had 17 turnovers today. Didn't have a ton of turnovers because of that. But a lot of times taking away that first down screen curl guy, then shot dribble, then next pass, and then end up with the Holloman with an open three anyway. Nebraska, good job taking away your best things. But Michigan State getting to your secondary and tertiary looks for open three-pointers. Ended up 39% for the day. I don't know if Michigan State's always going to be a good three-point shooting team, but the number of open three-pointers today was interesting, was good also.
Yeah, there are a couple things I really like about this team. I think Izzo mentioned as much as it's cliche when you talk about teams playing for each other, but it's obvious to me that these guys like each other.
Yeah.
And like at the end of the game in the second half when the game's out of reach and you guys are making extra passes, that tells you a lot about the selfless nature of this team. But when you look back to last year and you talk about mental fatigue, I think you make an interesting point there because there's a lot of guys on this team. I mean, Jaden Akins leads the team in scoring today. He plays 20 minutes. And he played 20 minutes of hard defense, and he went hard, and he feels like he played a full game. But if you look back at last year with no inside scoring, without a stretch element in the offense, with super guard dominant. I mean, think about like a guy like Tyson Walker. It was the Tyson Walker show or nobody's show because he had to be the guy every single night, and teams knew that, and he had to work like crazy to get those shots. So it's Tyson Walker and all the dribbling that he had to do. And then when you get in a scenario like that, Michigan State had some decent guards, but when you got a guy like Hogard that can't shoot a three, or might be out of shape and stuff like that, all the over-dribbling, I think it really taxed Michigan State's backcourt. I think these guys are fresh. They want to run. And they're really feeling good about themselves because they're executing a game plan and having success doing it.
It's interesting. Who led Michigan State in minutes today? Trey Holloman. The guy's been here for 3 years, been patient, played a role in the starting lineup. Now, I don't know if he's going to stay in the starting lineup. I don't know if the substitution patterns are perfect in that whole situation, but he ends up getting 24 minutes.
Defensively, man, I mean, with Trey Holloman, Trey Holloman does some really good things defensively, and the thing that people don't realize with him, and I've said this so many times at VCAST, but his wingspan is so dang long,
He's stronger now, too.
Yeah, but his wingspan is he's got a wingspan of a dude that's like 6'8". He's got one of the longest wingspans on the team for his size. He's athletic and confident and stronger, like you mentioned. He's got an edge to him. And so I think when you got Holloman out there on the floor, Jace Richardson does some great things off the bench, and I don't know what's going to happen with him as far as being – but Holloman does a lot of really good things, and he plays a really good defense. And Akins has really – taking his defense seriously, feeling really good about it, regardless of his shot is falling. I thought he started out playing really good defense on Juwan Gary. That defensive lineup with Fears, Daisy Fresh at the beginning of the game, Fears, Holloman, and Akins is really, really good because you don't have that weak link. You don't have to worry about like a Hogard who might be good against a bigger guard that's a little bit slower, but is going to get torn apart against a smaller guard, and you didn't know if he'd be bought in from the start of the game. Or you have to get lit up at halftime.
Yeah, there's times when Holloman really moves his feet on defense when he's fresh, and he can take it up a gear defensively, and that's a plus. Paul, just a few years ago, the state of Michigan ranked first in the nation for deposit container recycling. 90% of all purchased bottles and cans were being redeemed for the deposits. Today, only 73% are being redeemed in the state of Michigan. That means Michiganders are forfeiting $105 million every year in bottle and can deposits that are not being redeemed. This deficit is having a negative impact on the environment. When Michigan's recycling rate drops, It hurts the environment, it hurts industry, and it hurts all of us. Help the environment, help yourself, take them back, take those bottles and cans back. They're your lakes, your roads, and your beaches, and it's your dime. So take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back, a message from Schupan, a great Michigan State company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. So now Michigan State has 10 days off, final exams, going to play Oakland University December 17th on a Tuesday night, Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. 10 days off. They're pretty rested and pretty fresh right now. So Izzo's going to try to continue to build. You would think you're in a role right now, you want to keep playing. Maybe it's best for the long term for Michigan State to have some time off. In the past, Michigan State has tried to squeeze in a game during finals week here and there, sometimes with not the greatest results. When there is graduation here at the Breslin on probably next Saturday, Michigan State often would play a home-and-home neutral. Then when they went to UConn years ago and Arizona years ago, or Brigham Young or Wichita State or Texas, they're not doing that this time. I think that's. I've never asked Izzo specifically about it, but I think that's a reaction to the Big Ten season going to 20 games and encroaching into December, whereas in the past this might have been a game against Western Michigan or Kent State or somebody, and then Nicholls State. So you kind of want to have a test. They've had some tests. The Big Ten's played 2 games early December, so the schedule is not seasoned the way it used to be. But now 10 days off, getting ready for Oakland University in Detroit. Your thoughts about the next 10 days?
Oakland's always tough, but it's nice to see some of the guys, because there's guys on this team that are. You want guys to keep on playing because Michigan State's playing well, but I can see guys on this team that are going to benefit from this. Jace Richardson's a young player. I get it. He's smooth as the most freshman. But, I talked to him today a little bit, and he was like, I played okay on defense, but there's a couple covers that I missed. Him having a chance to work on himself and then going in the film room and saying, hey, if you just do this, you can be just a little bit better. For a guy like Frankie Fiddler, who I think has done a lot better at doing some of the things like he hustles, man. He does get his hands on a lot of different stuff. I think he's moving his feet a lot better. Even a couple times when he got fouled today, he got in places faster than I thought he could, faster than he did earlier in the season. But for guys like that, or Shimon Zapala, just working on themselves, developing chemistry with different lineups, getting to practice some different things that they might test. It's nice for those guys to have a little bit of reset and then try to move forward. A guy like Colin Carr, who's doing so many things good right now, but can he get his shot just a little bit better? So he's doing great things driving to the basket, doing great things as a rebounder, improving substantially as a defender, an on-ball defender in my opinion, but can he get just a little bit better in this area? And there's a lot of other guys on the team that if they can just tighten up their games a little bit in certain areas, or they can get some work in the practice gym just to feel a little bit better about, then Michigan State can go from being a good team to maybe even better and actually get to the point where they can use their depth and can actually contend for a conference championship. I don't know, I don't think there's a dominant team in the Big Ten this year. From all the games that I've watched, like I said before, lots of different teams have weaknesses. There's not a Purdue this year. So can you get just a little bit better at being the best version of yourself during this off season? Yeah, sometimes the time off hurts, but for some of those guys that aren't, they're first year guys or first year guys playing major roles, or guys like Kurtan coming off the bench, can you just get just a little bit better? And I think that's where this holiday thing can improve. Jeremy Fierce is another guy, playing really good, but can he get his conditioning just a little bit better so he's got a little bit more horsepower? Like he had pre-injury. Can his shot get just a little bit better? So there's lots of good things going on right now, but there's lots of things that you can do in the practice gym to make this Michigan State team even better. So I think it's kind of an exciting time for Michigan State to have some success, but also have an opportunity to work on themselves and get better, and then go ahead and try to do that against Oakland.
And they're taking final exams seriously, giving them some time. In this age of NIL and transfer portal and teams going from team to team, or players going from program to university in 3 different places and never getting progress toward a degree, these guys are going to be studying and taking exams for real. I'm not sure that happens many more places these days.
Right.
So good for them.
That's kind of the impressive thing about coming home at 2:30, 3 in the morning on Wednesday or early Thursday morning. Those guys were in classes. I asked Jace Richardson about how that was, having that 2-day prep with the road Big Ten game, and then he's like, man, it was a grind because we had to go to classes. Some of these guys, like what you talked about, the NIL and guys switching from 3 schools in 3 years.
Yeah.
It's not like that, but these guys are not only get to play for a great basketball program, but they have a real college experience.
When you're transferring 3 times, you can't help but lose sight on a degree because you're losing credits as you go, and then it's just that's one of the unintended consequences Izzo talks about. But for Michigan State, for right now, final exams time, so that's kind of good. So anyway, for Paul Konyndyk, anything else? Anything else? My name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast with the Spartans from the Breslin Center in East Lansing for SpartanMag.com.